Our headline story. AfCFTA's unified monetary platform. Now, money makes the world go round. This is a phrase many take for granted despite being factual. Can the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement make money go round the African continent? One of the most promising aspects of the agreement is the unified monetary system. Can this system work for Africa? What are the issues around it? We'll get answers to these questions and more on today's show. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. The Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, or AfCFTA, has announced that the continent will soon have its own unified platforms and payment platform system to ease the burden of doing business in 42 currencies. Funding for this and many other projects with the agreement is being provided by the African Exports-Imports Bank. Together, they are developing a Pan-African payments and settlement platform to overcome the challenges of a multiplicity of currencies on the continent. According to Wamkele Mene, if one is in Nigeria and wants to trade with someone in Kenya, they first have to convert the naira into the US dollar, and the recipients will then convert the dollar into the Kenya shilling. He explained that this is costly. It actually contributes also to inefficient trade patterns on the continent. There are 42 currencies across Africa, but the Secretary General is confident that through this platform and in the absence of a common currency, some of these present challenges will be overcome. He said that he does expect Africa to become a monetary union, but that will take some time. The Secretary General believes that the agreement also offers the continent a unique opportunity to establish regional value chains that will make an impact on national economies, create jobs, and push back the frontiers of poverty. Joining me is Ikos Akwobuvayan. He is the Chief Investment Officer of Ovid Capital, and he joins us from South Africa. Ikos, before we get into the monetary system conversation, it has been a few months since the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has kicked off. Have there been any positive developments regarding the agreement since January the 1st, 2021?
Yes, there's been a lot of work, and the Secretary of the African Free Trade Continental Agreement, he's been moving around. He was in Ghana to see the President Ado. He's been around the continent. There's been a lot of movement. We expect to hear a full report by a timeline of June this year. But there's been a lot of movement on that.
When you say movement, him having meetings and us seeing some positive footprints of the agreement, taking off in January, it's slightly different things. So have we seen some countries sort of start to align towards what the agreement is all about?
So what has been happening, there are a few things in terms of tariff that needs to be settled, and a lot of talks on the tariffs. When you look at a few countries have agreements on tariff with different other countries out of the continent, and that's been discussed, and also trying to raise capital for the agreement. So that's been done, and that's why I said there was a timeline given for June, and by first week of July we should have a full report. But there's a lot of activities going on behind the scene.
All right. So now let's drill down to our focus today. So part of what's happening with the Continental Agreement is a unified monetary system that is really in the future, but it's something that many have projected for the continent. What's the drive behind having a unified monetary system as sort of a future achievement, a future milestone for the agreement?
Okay. Let me, in 2019, the Johannesburg Declaration, it was set out that Africa should have what is now called the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. That payment and settlement system is supposed to be ready by, towards the end of this year. There's also a timeline. The reason for that, I'll just take you back a little bit. This is just a payment system to ease trade time, reduce time and cost. In the African continent, it costs for transactions, formal transactions, costs about 5 billion a year. And this will be reduced. Of course, that 5 billion is always put to the consumer and time constraint. So this platform will help to remove all of that. Okay. I want to mention first that During the 1991 treaty, it was agreed that a common currency, the current currency, a one currency in the continent. That is on the pipeline, and there's some time to go. But the timeline was given that Africa must have the African Monetary Union, and this we expect should have been established by 2023, and we should have a currency by that time.
Okay. So there are plans, and we'll get into what this monetary union might look like. But as the Secretary General of the AfCFTA agreement has said, this changing of money, having to change currencies from one denomination, or rather one currency to another, because you're trying to do business across the continent, has also cost us. And you've said that the figure is put at about $5 billion yearly. So let's focus a bit more on that. What has been the impact of this being the way that we've done business on the continent before now?
Of course, there are 42 currencies in the continent, and Africa is now also trading with itself. Now, with the free trade agreement, Africa is expected to trade more with itself, with also fixing the treaty issues. But before now, when you want to do a transaction, for example, from Johannesburg to Accra in Ghana, you need a foreign bank. You need to buy US dollar or euro, depending on the foreign currency, and it takes a long time. And you have to source that foreign currency, and it costs a waste time. It costs time on the transaction. It costs you losing money. And with this platform, all that will be taken away. That will be reduced. You'll be able to go to your bank. Banks can directly deal with Central Bank, which will be supported by the African Export and Import Bank, and they'll be, putting money in this to make sure there's enough money in the system to cater for this kind of transaction. This kinds of transaction in the about 30 billion a year, and we expect that to increase.
That's interesting. So there is some positive outlook for us. So let's talk about the payment and the settlement platform for the agreement. It's part of the 5 instruments of the agreement, sort of falling under the online negotiating form in a way, but more falling under the digital payment system. So why is this digital payment system so critical to the success of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement?
Of course, we are in an era where, the world has improved in terms of access to digital infrastructure, and Africa wants to take that advantage. First of all, with the timing on getting a proper currency where everybody, me and you, can use on a day-to-day basis, even for tourism, this is different. So the continent is trying something preliminary that can come early and can take away a burden now quickly. And like I said, that was decided in 2019. So the best thing to use was a platform because it does exist. And of course, the Africans saw what's happened in Kenya and countries like Nigeria and South Africa, using digital payment system to ease movement of money and trade between day-to-day people. And to use that on this level was advised, and it is the right idea to reduce this cost and help trade in the continent.
All right, Eccles, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into what a unified monetary system could look like on the continent and what needs to happen for that to happen as well. This is Business Edge. And of course, we're talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Stay with us. The Chief Investment Officer over Capita, Eccles Apovayan, is still with me on Business Edge, and we're looking at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and, of course, the unified monetary system. So, Eccles, we know it's going to take a number of years, some have said even up to a decade, if not more, for the continent to feel the full impact of the agreement. But how soon do you think the platform can be up and running? How soon do you think the platform can start making an impact on intra-African business?
So let me just repeat and get it very clear. This platform is just interim. It's something that will be ready by the end of this year, early next year. It's on an advanced stage. African Export and Import Bank has already pledged 500 million to support the system. The system would need about 3 to 5 billion to function properly. And those funds are being raised and all things are put in place for the system to function. So by end of this year, that's the timeline. By 2021, the system should have been finalized to be running.
Okay.
But this, and I'll say we shouldn't lose sight of the target of 2023 for an African currency.
2023, that's just 2 years from now. But before we get into that, just quickly on the Africa Export-Import Bank being part of this. So you talked about money being raised. How are they raising the money? From where? Because we know money is put into the bank by partners as well. So is there going to be an additional funding, or is it coming from the regular funding that the bank has?
So some central banks are pledging, and that's one of the reasons why Wamleke Mene went to Ghana. The figure is not yet out. The Ghanaian president has pledged some funds to the system. So central banks and countries are pledging funds into the system for it to raise the capital it needs. But there's no short, there's not been any question that the money for the system to function will not be raised. There's been a lot of commitment and pledges on that. So there's no doubt that the 3 billion to 5 billion will be raised.
All right, so let's come back to the conversation around the unified monetary policy or system, basically trying to have a European Union and a euro for the continent, whatever we decide to call it. Even before the continental conversation, there have been regional conversations around how this could be. Papers have been submitted. There have been talks about this. But for the most part, there's never been a definitive agreement that has gotten the support of most of Africa's nations. Why has it been so difficult to achieve before now?
Look, we shouldn't miss sight of the processes we have taken. The African Union first had an agenda to keep the continent stable. This treaty was signed in 1991. At that time, there was a lot of wars in the continent, and there were a lot of dictators in the continent. So there was forced to stabilize the continent, and that's taken some time. And we're much in a better place now. So this is a time more for business. And we've just signed the African Free Trade Continental Agreement. And of course, you know, we lost a lot of time trying to get political stability, social stability in the continent. So in the last few years, it's more time now talking about the economy and business and the prosperity of the people in the continent. But I think more leaders are on the fore. The time is now. The technologies are available now in the world. The awareness has come now, and people are no more fighting much wars, but are trying to get food on the table. So it's right now to begin to put all these discussion on the table.
So it's good you talk about putting the discussions on the table, because let's look at the echo that is coming from the Francophone, Anglophone West African countries and the sort of the conversation around that. There was an involvement with Nigeria, then it seems that Nigeria pulled out. So you had a number of countries on the West African side of things trying to come together with this. And this was last year. Up to now, it doesn't seem to have taken off. The money, the instruments, the structure that needed to be put in place for it to take off has not happened. Don't you think that 2023 is a bit ambitious, even if all of the things are starting to line up for Africa? Is it not a bit ambitious in terms of us being able to get to that unified monetary system?
Look, Africa came together and set up a timeline. It could seem ambitious, but you need to have a timeline so people can work with it. I understand that we may not get it exactly on that timeline, but a lot needs to be done. And one of the things is, first of all, the African economic community, which we are seeing now with the African Free Trade Agreement. There's still a few knots to complete and tie. And you saw that Nigeria took a while to sign it because of some concerns, but eventually Nigeria signed. So these things do take time. I mean, you're talking about a continent that has 54 countries. And these 50 countries, they've had colonial masters, and they've had agreement with other countries and nations. So those agreements and treaties they've had with other countries are being looked at. I think you may say it's ambitious, but I think it's doable. At least we should have something concrete, and by 2023, we should have something really strong in terms of commitment from the African countries.
All right. So one of the issues around this that has been brought up has been the value of the currencies on the continent, sort of pegging the 42 currencies together, the weak and the strong carrying each other as it has been, or as it will likely be once one currency comes about, and then we sort of all bear the consequences of that. But is there any proposed workaround to this on the path to a unified monetary system when these questions come up regarding the strength of one African currency over the other?
Look, it doesn't work the way you are trying to demonstrate it. First of all, I'll give you an example of how currencies work and the wars of currency. So currency, you have wars with other currency because they trade with our currency. For example, the rand would trade with the US dollar with a particular value, but the exact strength of the rand can be calculated differently. But as of today, the rand trades with the US dollar about 14 rands to a dollar, but the real strength of the rand is about 9 right now. So when you look at these factors in terms of currency, you begin to understand. Once you create a new currency backed by the economies and central banks of this nation, you begin to give it life over time. So the initial worry of pegging other currencies and how they relate to that currency begins to drop off, and it will be left for the nations, each particular nation, to continue to use their currency. Of course, in the beginning, you have an option to use your currency and this currency. And over time, you begin to drop your currency because obviously this currency is expected to get stronger and better because it's backed by 1.2 billion people. It's backed by 54 countries and their economies. So it's expected to grow strong. And when it goes in the international market to battle against other currency, then it will stand a better chance. And it will be traded more. It will gain more value over time.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, Tekos, before we wrap up, we have seen some interesting movement coming from COMESA, and that's the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. It has 21 members and recently announced that it had agreed to a uniform custom tariff. And a lot of people have said this is something that should have been done earlier and that should be done around all the regional agreements like that. Do we expect to see more of these agreements, more of these uniform movements as countries and regions look to make the Africa Continental Free Trade Area operational as much as possible in their domains and also regionally for themselves?
Yeah, in my last book, I recommended something like this, so I was glad to hear the announcement. The continent is quite big. When you get regions beginning to commit and come together in regionally, in blocks to do this kind of thing, it's very commendable. And of course, I am saying to all the regions to follow suit, and this will help the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in the long run, because obviously you'll be able to see the bottlenecks and how this works in regionally, and then you can look at it on the whole continent. But this is very welcome, and we hope also SADC and the West African bloc and can follow this kind of suit and have a common tariff.
All right, and that's how we'll wrap this conversation for today. Thank you, Ikos Apovayan, for joining me as usual on Business Edge.
Thank you, Tolu.
All right, we'll see you next time. Okay, so before we wrap things up, let's give you a few stories we are keeping our eyes on. And the tax conversation in South Africa just got a little bit more interesting. Now, retired South African Judge Dennis Davis says tax evaders should end up behind bars. He believes that this would be a real deterrent, as the idea of going to jail certainly concentrates the mind. Davis has been appointed as a consultant for the South African Revenue Service for a year with the option to renew. His mission is to increase its tax collection capabilities and expand the shrinking tax base. Foreign-owned ICT firms have a deadline of 3 years to ensure they have a 30% ownership by Kenyans. In the latest Gazette notice for April 9, 2021, Joe Macheru, Kenya's ICT Cabinet Secretary, has given foreign firms a deadline of March 2024 to comply. The Central Bank of Nigeria has started the registration of other financial institutions on its credit risk management system to improve credit risk management. Other financial institutions are development finance institutions, microfinance banks, primary mortgage banks, and finance companies. And finally, the developers of a $4 billion hydropower plant on the Zambia-Zimbabwe border have delayed the project until 2022 from its initial date of 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Pre-construction work on the Batoka Gorge project has been suspended for several months because of the virus, and while funding is still being secured. This is coming from the Zambezi River Authority spokesperson Fitzgerald Michundu. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. And also head to our website and our YouTube channel, as well as our mobile app if you missed any of our great conversations on financial, business, and economic news coming out of the continent. I'm Tolulokwe Adile Rubalogun. I'll see you next time.